On the Voice of the Philippines, the blind audition of One Day by Kakoy Baldo didn't feel like a competition entry, it felt like a moment history accidentally captured. In this retelling, Kakoy becomes Manila, a poor street-born soul whose voice carried the weight of the entire city. The moment Manila opened his mouth, the room changed. His voice was not smooth or trained in the traditional sense, it was cracked, weathered, and deeply scarred, like it had been shaped by hunger, rejection, and years of being unheard. Every note sounded as if it had survived something. This wasn't a singer trying to impress judges, this was a man telling the truth in the only language he had left. The song, One Day, transformed from a hopeful melody into a painful prayer, echoing the dreams of millions who wake up every morning with nothing but faith and keep going anyway. As the music flowed, Manila's voice painted pictures no camera could show: crowded streets, sleepless nights, empty pockets, and a heart that refused to give up. You could almost hear the struggle between every breath, as if each lyric had been paid for with real-life suffering. The power of his performance came from its honesty: no tricks, no perfection, just raw emotion spilling into the air. The judges couldn't see him, but they felt him. The silence in the studio wasn't planned, it was forced by the weight of the moment. People stopped moving. People stopped breathing. This was the kind of voice that doesn't belong to a stage, it belongs to life itself. What made this audition unforgettable was not just how Manila sang, but why he sang. There was desperation in his tone, but also resilience. His voice carried the sound of someone who had been overlooked too many times, someone who had learned to survive without applause. In a world obsessed with perfection, Manila reminded everyone that broken voices often tell the strongest stories. By the time the first verse ended, it was already clear, this was not just an audition. This was a viral moment waiting to happen, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful performances come from the poorest places, and the loudest truths are spoken by those who have nothing left to lose. As Manila continued singing, One Day, the emotion in the room grew heavier, almost unbearable. His voice didn't rise to show off range or technique, instead, it sank deeper, pulling everyone into his reality. Each line sounded like it had been lived, not rehearsed. The pain in his tone was subtle but relentless, the kind that doesn't scream but stays with you long after the sound fades. The judges, Cebu, Davao, and Quezon, sat frozen in their chairs, unable to escape the feeling that this performance was exposing something real and uncomfortable. This wasn't entertainment anymore, it was a confession. You could hear the years of struggle in every breath, as if Manila had waited his whole life for just this one chance to be heard. When Simon Cowell listened, his reaction was unusually restrained, almost poor in expression, stripped of his usual sharp commentary. There was no smirk, no quick judgment, no dramatic interruption. Instead, there was silence, long, heavy, and honest. It was the silence of someone realizing that criticism would feel disrespectful in the face of such raw truth. Manila's voice had disarmed him. The song's message of hope felt fragile yet powerful, like a candle burning in a storm. Simon leaned forward, not as a judge hunting flaws, but as a listener trying to understand the story behind the sound. In that moment, wealth, fame, and status meant nothing, only the voice mattered. As the final notes of the verse echoed through the studio, the emotional tension reached its peak. The judges could feel that this was not a performance built for applause, but for survival. Manila stood unseen, poor in material things but rich in soul, while the room wrestled with emotion instead of judgment. The audience at home could feel it too. This was the kind of moment people replay, share, and talk about for years. It was raw, imperfect, and unforgettable. By the time the chairs began to turn, it was already clear, Manila had not just sung a song, he had told a story that demanded to be heard, making this audition destined to go viral across the world. By the time Manila reached the final lines of One Day, the performance had completely taken over the room. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the emotional weight it carried. It sounded like a man standing at the edge of exhaustion, still choosing hope even when life had given him every reason to quit. The melody felt slower, heavier, as if time itself had paused to listen. This was no longer about winning the voice of the Philippines, it was about being seen, even if only for a few minutes. Every word landed with purpose, cutting through the silence and settling deep in the hearts of everyone present. The judges, Cebu, Davao, and Quezon, were visibly moved, but it was Simon Cowell's reaction that defined the moment. His face showed disbelief mixed with respect, a rare softness replacing his usual authority. He looked like someone who had judged thousands of singers, yet had just been reminded why music matters in the first place. There was a poverty in his reaction, not of money, but of words. He struggled to respond because no clever critique could match what had just happened. Manila's voice had exposed something real, something that couldn't be measured by technique or market value. It was the sound of survival, and Simon knew it. As the final note faded, the silence that followed was louder than any applause. Manila stood there unseen, poor in possessions but powerful in spirit, while the judges sat with emotions they hadn't prepared for. This was the kind of audition that crosses borders, languages, and cultures. Viewers didn't just hear a song, they felt a life. In that moment, Manila became the voice of every forgotten street, every ignored dream, and every person still waiting for their one day. It was raw, unforgettable, and destined to live far beyond the stage, proving that the strongest voices often rise from the hardest places.